welcome to Incoming, the video podcast that looks back at the week's historical miniature releases. This is episode 25 that looks back at the releases for week ending the 27th of November 2009. As always, I'm your host, Neil Shook. Well, it's been a steady week on the historical miniature releases front, so enough new releases to make up a top 10, but not much more than that. So let's take a look at what's come out this week. At number 10 we have a bunch of new releases from Redoubt Enterprises. Now she's just very slightly actually bunched 3 releases in together for this number 10 this week, but they've been rather busy. So we actually have 3 new releases for 2 different periods. First of all, we have a French-Indian War. For this they've released a couple of vignettes, one of Major Wolfe, based in part on the famous painting of his death at the Battle of Quebec. And then you have a similar wounded vignette of the Marquis de Montcalm. Other than that, you then have several unusual figure releases of, well, people being scalped. Quite an unusual subject to release in miniature, I think. Probably one of those things that, well, you'll come across in vignettes of the French-Indian War, perhaps at shows or what have you. Something to kind of hide away during a game. And then there were a set of releases for the Russia-Japanese War from 1904-1905. We have a set of Russian infantry, officer, bugler, riflemen in various poses, followed by a set of Japanese infantry for the same period. Rather an unusual period to cover, as it's a little known conflict. But for those of you into turn of the century warfare, then this again might be something a little bit different to look into. Number 9, and the first of a couple of new releases from Steve Barber models. Now, Steve's been releasing quite a large range for the War of 1812, and these are more in that particular range. And these are Cossack artillery crew. These aren't bad, but when you compare these to the gun crew that were released for someone like the Perrys a couple of weeks ago for their French artillery and stuff, in comparison, these look fairly static and two-dimensional. Number 8, and a new release from Brigade Games. Again, a fairly unusual subject, these. These are Chinese infantry, but they're actually wearing German kit. So on initial inspection, they may be mistaken for Germans. Until, of course, you come across the command pack and a couple of the infantry packs, where the figures involved are wielding rather large swords in addition to their usual kit. Not a subject I'm particularly familiar with, but we've got a sizable release here from Brigade, a nice selection of poses. Number 7, a new release from Artizan Designs. Actually, this is a preview of their upcoming Landsknechts for their Renaissance range. And this is looking to be a very good range of figures. Obviously, the first release is going to be one of the fairly standard pike blocks. It remains to be seen if they're going to do 2 different poses. One with pikes at rest and another with pikes attacking. But something to look forward to for you fans of war in the Age of Reason. Number 6, and the new company on the scene. This is a company called Play War. And just in case you didn't think there were enough World War II German figures on the market, here we have some more. I think it's quite brave of Play War to come into a market that's already fairly flooded. But we've got a nice selection of figures here. A couple of very unusual poses which kind of catch the eye, especially in their Waffen-SS range. Figures are fairly unusual poses and look pretty interesting. So maybe just different enough from the norm to catch people's eyes and to expand people's collections with these new figures. So I wish them well. Number 5, it's back to Steve Bob models and a change in scale, this time to 10mm. There's a couple of new releases for his Zulu War range. And here we see a cannon and crew, and also some colonial cavalry. Now these I think are much better stuff this week from Steve Barber than his 28mm releases, and are actually quite eye-catching. I always thought that doing Zulu War in smaller scale is a lot easier because of the vast number of Zulus that you've got to paint. So a couple of nice releases here from Steve. And staying with 10mm, just moving companies, we have another couple of releases this week from TB Line. Moving away from the problems they have with spearmen, we have some archers and we have some foot knights. And I think these are really nice actually. The foot knights especially. A really nice amount of detail despite the small size of the figures, so I'm pretty impressed with these. Into the top 3, and at number 3, a new release from Gorgon Studioes and the mighty sculpting tool of Steve Seller. This is a Celtic chieftain, quite an unusual looking model, It's a nice pose, and obviously the thing that dominates the model here is the headgear. Although I really do like this model, my only criticism I think would be the fact that the helmet I think is just very slightly too big. It's a little on the tall side. It reminds me more of something you might see associated with the Syrians rather than Celts. But that's a minor issue in what is otherwise quite a nice looking figure. Well sculpted with lots of detail. So that's my number 3. Number 2, and it's a preview of the 3rd box set of paratroops from Bolt Action Miniatures, part of Warlord. In recent weeks we've seen the release of the British Airborne and US Paras. Now it's the turn of the Fallschirmjäger. As we can see it coming, we have a squad of troops complete with FG-42s and MG-42 as well. And they've also previewed a model of a mortar. So it's difficult to tell from these images. I think these look to be more suitable for late war rather than early war. So just by going for a bit of the kit that the mortar crew are wearing. They seem more in keeping with the infantry role that the Fallschirmjäger were performing during the Battle for Normandy, for example, as opposed to their early war deployments in Belgium and Sicily. But Fallschirmjäger were one of my favourite units of World War II, so it's always nice to see new releases of these particular forces. And my personal favourite release of this week, well, it's Front Rank and their 40mm American War of Independence range. Now, Front Rank have been producing figures in this particular range for some time, and they've always been of pretty high quality. These are no different. These latest releases are British Fusiliers in bear caps. What we have here are a couple of officers, one marching, one standing, a couple of standard bearers, marching and standing, a couple of sergeants, marching and standing, and then finally 2 rank and file troops, again marching and standing poses, but the troops have 3 separate heads for a little bit of variance. An excellent release from Front Rank, and also one that's pretty competitive. You know, they're priced very well, only £2 a figure, which is pretty cheap in the 40mm market. I think that's excellent value for money for the quality of figures that you're getting. So a fantastic release from Front Rank to round out my top 10 for this week. Well, that's it for this week's miniatures. I hope you've seen something that you like. Before I go, I just want to say a huge thank you to Zach at Tabletop Gaming News and Bill at the Miniatures page. Without these two guys' sites especially, this podcast simply wouldn't be possible. And if you've missed any podcasts in the past, you can always see them streamed at Warboots TV. Go to Warboots, scroll to the bottom of the page, and there's always some Wargames related videos streaming there. Well, that's everything for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Happy gaming, and I'll see you soon. Bye.